All right, now let me show you let's say if we prepared a flexible budget. So let's create a flexible budget here. Again, for now, I'm assuming numbers. Let's say at 800 units, sorry, 800 units, sales should have been 80,000, which makes sense because if it if at 1,000 units, I wanted to make 100,000 revenue, at 800 units, I would want to make 80,000 in revenue. Now direct material. Now let's think about this. Okay, at 100,000 or rather 1,000 units, we wanted to spend $30,000 worth of material. So let's see how much material we will need for 800 units. So you take the budgeted total material divided by the budgeted units, which is 1,000, to get the per unit that we wanted to happen, times by 800. There we go. So now we know that at 800 units, the direct material spent money should have been 24,000. I hope now you're saying, okay, now we can actually compare the numbers and figure out where we overspent the money or saved the money in real terms rather than just being the change happening because of change in quantity levels. Similar with the labor. So we'll do labor divided by units times 800 to see how much it should have been for 800 units. Now you might say, like, why are you dividing the total by the units and to find the per unit? Because we'll learn that labor is a variable cost. So I can basically divide it by the units and I will find out for every 1 unit how much money am I spending. Now for manufacturing overhead, of course you cannot do the same thing. You have to break it down into variable and fixed overhead, which if you're giving an exam, it will already uh, be into. So let's do that. So let's say this is the variable overhead, and let's say there's a fixed overhead part to this. So this is variable overhead, and then there's a fixed overhead part to this. So let's say fixed overhead was 10,000, and actually we also had 10,000, or rather, let's say actual it was 9,000, and flexible budget will be 10,000. Why? Because when it's a fixed cost, it cannot change with the level of production. So whatever the static budget says, flexible budget says the same thing because it's not based on units. Doesn't matter if I sold less or more. I have to pay the same rent. Let's say rent is a fixed cost, right? So that doesn't change between the two. But however, the variable overhead, we can assume for this many units, it should have been 5,000 divided by 1,000 to get the per unit, and then times by what actually happened. Okay, so there was a fly on my webcam there. Okay, so times by 800. There we go. Now we know the flexible budget means how much money we should have spent or made based on this sales level and what actually happened based on this sales level. And now we can identify where we went wrong. So when making sales revenue, there's no, like, we didn't go wrong with making sales revenue. We made the amount of revenue we should have made based on 800 units, right? However, for material, we can see we overspent material by $1,000. We should have spent 24,000, but we spent 25. So that means we have $1,000 of variance between the actual data and the budgeted data. And please remember, whenever there's a variance which is not good for us, this is called unfavorable variance. So now, okay, at the end, I'll explain what to do there. For this one, again, we have the same problem. We overspent $1,000 on labor as well. So this will be 1,000 unfavorable variance. Again, we lost $1,000 on labor that we shouldn't have because we should have spent $8,000 on labor. And similarly with the variable overhead, oh, okay, in this case, we don't have any variance, no variance, because what actually happened is what I wanted to happen. However, in the fixed overhead, actual was 9,000. I expected 10,000. So now here we actually saved money. So this is called a favorable variance where it's good for you. The variance was good for you. There we go. And just to give you the title, these are called variances. Variance basically means the difference between actual data and the flexible budget or static budget, depending on what type of variance you're doing. But just to let you know, uh, comparing static budget with actual and finding variances don't tell you anything because the data is skewed based on the units. It's not correct. So in real life, we never compare actual with the static. We compare actual data with the flexible budget. And also, even in your exams, in the questions, you'll be supposed to compare actual data with flexible budget and find the variances. And if you can see here, now I know that direct material people spent $1,000 more. So of course, I will investigate that and figure out what's the problem. That's about to come in our future classes of the topic variance analysis. And similarly, direct labor, we also need to investigate what went wrong. Why did the HR department, let's say, spend more money than they should have? And for variable overhead, there's nothing there. For fixed overhead, we will also investigate. Now, because the thing is, we don't only investigate when it's bad for us, we also investigate when it's good for us to reward the people who saved us money, to encourage them so next year they do even better job, if not the same job. If you don't encourage them and recognize their contribution, they will not do the save you money there next year. So we want to reward our key employees. And that's it for this video, and we'll continue on the next one.